Hello and welcome to this introduction to the history coursework. This is specifically an introduction for Route B students of history at Peter Symonds College. If you've stumbled on this from elsewhere, then probably most of what I say won't be super relevant to you, but knock yourself out and watch it if you want. Route B students, welcome. I'm just going to take this opportunity to introduce the coursework task to you and just outline where we're heading in this half term. So firstly, just two things to say about the coursework itself. First thing is that it is worth 20% of your A-level. Now, this is a significant chunk. It is worth getting the marks on the board, as it were, and in an element where you can control how well you do by the amount of time you take over this, by listening to the advice that we give you about how to write it. That said, it's not quite big enough to swing your grade one way or the other. If you do well in this, it can act as a little buffer against having a bad day in an exam next year, but it certainly won't guarantee you a particular grade if you do well or if you do badly. And every year we see people over or underperform on their coursework by doing better or worse in the exams than they had in the autumn term. So that's the first thing to say. 20%, important, not quite critical. The second thing to say is it's quite a big task and it can feel quite a daunting task as we set into it. It was designed by or asked for by the universities because they wanted students who could show some independence of reading and research and thinking, and that they could go away and look at things for themselves and come back and present something in quite a big format. So it is quite an intimidating task. However, firstly, remember that we get all our students through this every year and you're no different to them. And secondly, bear in mind that the skills you're developing here will really help you, not just in the rest of your A-level, specifically, hugely, if you're going on to study history or something like history at university, because they're developing those research skills that you have there, but also actually just for life. These skills of being able to look at information and reach a judgment on a sensible and rational basis are very, very important. So embrace it in that spirit. And don't panic about the size of the extracts as and when you get to see them. So there is a PowerPoint that I'll have emailed you, an intro PowerPoint, and I'm just going to walk through some of the things that are on there first. And the first I just talked about the nature of this task, that you're going to be looking at some historians and your focus is on understanding the purpose of historians, how historians shape and craft history, and that they do that with their own agendas and their own understandings of history and how it's happened. And your job is to reach a critical view of how well they've done that, to explain how they've done that, and then to evaluate, to weigh up how well they've done that in your opinion. For you, Route B historians, you get a choice of 2 questions that you can apply this to. So having looked at earlier stuff in the first year, there's no restriction here, and you can look at either the start or the end of the Cold War. And you can see on the PowerPoint the questions, they're slightly odd questions, but the questions, the way they're phrased are: historians have disagreed about the origins of the Cold War. What's your view about the origins of the Cold War? Or historians have disagreed about the reasons for the end of the Cold War. What's your view about the end of the Cold War? There's no penalty for choosing one or the other. It's really just about the content you prefer and the extracts you prefer. I would say I think that the extracts are slightly clearer in their opinions on the end of the Cold War, but if you feel more comfortable on the origins, you're very welcome to do that. And every year we get people who do well at both. There's no kind of like one is easier than the other. Just looking then at the method of assessment, what you're actually going to do, you have to look at 3 chosen works. So you have to pick them, and you can pick them from a menu of historians that we've put together for you. Now, if you want to go away and find your own historian, or you've come across something that's been written more recently or perhaps more obscurely, then that's great. The exam board would love it if you found your own. But we went and looked in all the books that we knew of, and we found those that were sensibly sized and seemed to have a specific opinion. And we've scanned them in and attached them to the internet. You can go and look at them from today if you wish, although mostly we get people to look at them towards the end of June, start of July, just before we go off in the summer. And then one of your tasks will be, I'll tell you about that in a minute, to have a look at them over the summer. So you look at 3 historians, and it's very much like the interpretation question that you'll have done on the Glorious Revolution, where you're analysing what that interpretation is, what the main points that the historian is resting upon. You'll add your own evidence to that, perhaps using some of the evidence that's in the extract already, and you're going to reach a view about how credible that argument is, where the strengths of it are, and then also perhaps where the weaknesses of it are. You'll do that from your expert knowledge of what the Cold War, how the Cold War started or how the Cold War ended, and we'll come to that in a moment. How this all works out in the end is that you need to produce a written piece of work, the coursework. Now, the example doesn't demand that you write that in a specific way, but we are going to advise you super strongly to write it just as a normal essay, so that we kind of know where the structure lays, but also so in doing this that you are reinforcing some of those skills that you've been working on through the first year, and hopefully by thinking them through that you'll come out of this more confident about how to structure an essay and where the big marks, the analysis and evaluation marks, lay within that structure of an essay. We'll also get you to write it in pieces, so you will look at the extracts one by one, and in the autumn term we'll get you to write them one by one and then kind of put them together. The purpose of that is that we can then advise you as you go about how you're doing, rather than saving it all to the end and saying, oh, you've been on the wrong track from the start. So moving then into the task that we're setting. So before the summer, before we break up for the summer in July, our aim is to make sure that you know about the administrative aspects of the coursework. There is a log to keep. Every time you read or watch or listen to something about the Cold War, you should be making a note of what the book or the website or the program that you've seen, and you should be writing a little comment on it. We'll come to that in one of the Zoom sessions that I do with you. We're introducing to you the task. I've kind of started to do that already, and we'll come back to that, and also then the skills about how you're going to put that together, and we'll look at that in a few weeks' time probably. The main task that we're looking to do with you before the summer is to get you confident with the narrative of events. Now, what I'm going to do in the next week or so is to introduce to you very briefly the start and the end of the Cold War and what events happened, and then after that I'll set you up looking at more detail at the start or the end, whichever way you choose it, and helping you get to know those. You need to know those events so that when you read the extracts, A, they make sense because they're going to be talking about events and expecting you to understand when they refer to the Berlin blockade what that is, or the Reagan doctrine or something. But also so that you can start to evaluate whether they're using the evidence the right way or whether they're missing things out. I should say right now that to help you with that at an introductory level, there is a textbook available. This textbook is, I'll let you know the details of that. There are chapters of it scanned in and linked to the internet site. You're very welcome to. It's quite cheap, about £5 or so, maybe less if you get it secondhand, to get a physical copy, which you might prefer to do, but there are not as many physical copies around anymore because I think it's out of print now. But that's a really good place to go to start and just get a sense of what events are around. And if you've looked at the Cold War before, of course, you'll have some knowledge of that already. So administration, looking at the content, and we're also going to start to we're going to set you an assignment. That's what we're going to do. This will be like an interpretation essay based on a couple of short extracts, and the reason for this is so that I get to see your writing, but also so that we can begin to advise you very specifically about what we want you to do in the actual coursework when you come to write that. Finally then, over the summer, and we'll start this before the summer, but over the summer, we want you to go and look at those extracts and to come back from the summer having looked at enough of them in enough detail to have picked your 3, being confident of what their main argument is and how they disagree with each other. We will talk about that straight away after the summer. So if you leave it to the after the summer, you're going to be behind where you need to be. In that period after the summer, we'll take the first half term up to the October half term. All the lessons then will be dedicated to writing the coursework. And for me, I'll spend my time speaking to individuals about what they're doing, their plan, and looking at parts of their draft. We can only offer verbal feedback, so it does take quite a long time to do that. But hopefully it's quite a helpful process, and we want to make sure that everybody gets the chance to see that. It does mean you've got plenty of time, if you use it well, to write a really excellent piece of coursework and to hone it to make sure that it's really deliberate and focused. Having said that, we want to get rolling straight away in September, and so the deadline for the first part of the extract is going to be the 10th of September. That's about a week. That's a provisional deadline, but that's a week after you've been back. There will be time in the lessons to write that. Some homework time will be useful as well, and we will talk to you before the summer about what we're expecting too. That will mean that we can then say, yes, you're on the right track, keep going, look at your second and third, or actually you need to do more of this, go back to this in the next bit, and it will set us up well for the rest of the half term. As I said, the lessons up to half term will be focused on the coursework. After the half term, we'll start teaching the Germany topic, but there will be a couple of weeks grace there just to tidy up anything. It gives us a little chance to make sure that we've seen everyone, and it gives you a little chance to make sure everything's printed off and in order, and some of those admin tasks have been completed too. And so the final deadline, and it is a deadline, it's a proper example deadline, so you must meet it unless your legs have fallen off or something, and then we'll look into whether we can grant you an extension of a couple of hours or something. It is a deadline, I must emphasize that seriously. The deadline is the 17th of November at 1 p.m. and no later. We'll talk about that obviously nearer the time. So anyway, I hope that introduces both the task to you, gives you a sense of what we're up to and where we're going. And next time I'll start to talk about some of the bits of the start of the coursework. See you then.